Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Montgomery Parks Speaker Series. I'm Mike Riley, Director of Montgomery Parks, and I am super excited to be welcoming back Gil Penalosa as our featured speaker today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gil in a moment and what you're going to hear, but before we begin, I just have a few brief housekeeping items to go over. First, we're recording this presentation and we'll be providing a link so that you can refer back to any information that is presented later. Second, I want to direct your attention to the Q&A box. This is where you can submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. And I'll address as many as I can once Gil concludes with his presentation. I will be asking questions that you submit as I can, and Gil will be answering. Next, for those of you pursuing continuing education credits through the American Planning Association's Professional Institute or the Landscape Architecture Continuing Education System, please click on the sign-in link so that we can have a record of your attendance today. For those of you joining us for the first time, I want to just provide a brief introduction to our agency, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. We serve over 2 million residents in 2 highly diverse counties wrapping around our nation's capital, Montgomery County, Maryland to the north, and Prince George's County to the east. Our park system here in Montgomery County consists of 424 parks and over 37,000 acres of parkland, which is about 11% of our county's land mass, a very big regional park system. Of that land, about 2/3 is held in conservation, and about 1/3 is developed with active recreational amenities of every kind you could imagine, from trails to ball fields to parks that promote social connections, community building, health and wellness, and much, much more. With continued projected population growth, we are focused in Montgomery County about how we can provide a great urban park system in addition to the great legacy suburban park system we've developed since the 1930s. We're very proud to have won 6 gold medals as the best park system in the country from the National Recreation and Park Association. And now I'll get to why we're all here today. Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has spotlighted the necessity of parks and open space, but it has also magnified issues that have long existed, including the lack of equity, poverty, deficiency of parks in quantity and quality, shortage of recreation programs, poor sidewalks, unsustainable mobility, and unsafe streets. As we look toward a post-COVID landscape, what can we take away from this experience, and how much must we manage our parks and cities differently? Joining us today to share his insight on this topic is Gil Penalosa. Gil is the founder and chair of the internationally recognized nonprofit organization 880 Cities, as well as the first ambassador of World Urban Parks. Gil is passionate about creating vibrant and healthy cities for all people. Throughout his career, Gil has been a strong advocate for improving city parks, making his first mark in Bogota, Colombia, where he led the design and construction of over 200 parks and initiated the successful Open Streets program that sees over 1.3 million people walk, run, skate, and bike along Bogota's city roads every Sunday of the year. Gil has been invited to work in over 350 different cities around the globe, and we're very fortunate to have him with us today. For those of you here in Montgomery County who've been enjoying our 7 miles of open parkways over the last year on Sligo Creek Parkway, Beach Drive, and Little Falls, please thank Gil for that as the inspiration for that initiative. So just the audience we have today, we have over 250 people registered. I want to thank you all for joining us. You're a very diverse group. I think we have every park and recreation agency in Maryland represented, including agencies from the District of Columbia and Northern Virginia. So thank you for joining us. But in addition to park and recreation professionals, we have my county government colleagues from environment and transportation and permitting. We have our county council staff, elected and appointed officials, business and civic leaders, nonprofits, planners, consultants, and much, much more. So Gil, you have a very widely talented audience to address today. So one last thing before I turn it over to Gil, and the reason you're all here, I want to ask and invite Casey Anderson, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, to say a few words.
Well, I don't think that Gil is going to like that introduction very much, because the last time he was here, he pointed out that you should never tell yourself you're the best, because then you will think that you don't need to get better. But I'll put it to you, Gil. We do think that we're the best, but we also think that's not good enough. So I hope that'll be satisfactory, that we can always see that the need, the urgency to get better and to change, even if we're proud of of what we've accomplished. I think you said something in a presentation that I saw on the internet once that has stuck with me, and really, to me, says something not just about parks, but just our attitude about thinking about the future of places, not just parks and not just cities, but communities in general. You said that change is not unanimous. The general interest must prevail over the particular interest, and the cost of doing nothing is not nothing. And just as Mike was inspired by your opening the roadways in Bogota for us to open our roadways to biking and walking during the pandemic, those things that you said, I think about those all the time as we work not just in parks, but in land use and transportation planning and all the other things we do. So I hope that our audience today will be as inspired as both of us have been by what you have to say, and will take away some lessons that they'll apply every single day in their work. I have no doubt that they will.
Okay, thank you, Casey and Mike. Thank you very much. So I want to share my screen. Okay, do you see the full screen?
Yes.
We see the notes page, I think.
The what?
It's not in full slideshow mode, I don't think.
It's not?
Well, we can see the slides, but we also see the notes area at the bottom.
Oh, there shouldn't be. Sorry. So how about now?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Yeah, right now this is good. Yeah.
No notes, just the slide.
There you
Perfect.
go.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Mike and Casey and everyone on the call. So we're going to talk about the post-COVID-19 people and cities, but we are going to place special emphasis on parks and recreation, as well as sustainable mobility, how to get to the parks. I want you to think for a minute when we talk about cities, that half of the homes that will be around in 40 years around the world, half of the homes do not exist today. Do not exist today. Today we have about 3.5 billion people living in cities. And within the lifetime of our children, of our students, we're going to go to 7 billion. 7 billion. And it could be very nice and civilized, where people walk and ride bicycles and use public transit. And everybody has parks within walking distance, and nature close at home, on the sidewalks, on the parks, everywhere. The US population by 2060 is going to increase by 80 or 100 million people. In the US, you're going to have to build over 50 million homes, plus the homes of everybody that is moving from some cities to others and are not being replaced. So it's huge growth. I mean, to think about what is 50 million homes, that is like all of the homes in Canada, France, and Australia. And you're going to do that in the next 30 or 40 years. So it's huge. And the population in Montgomery County, by by 2050, in 30 years, is going to increase by over 20%. So it's very, very important, not only to improve our cities today, but also to create great cities for the future. What a wonderful opportunity, but also a huge responsibility, because the population is going to level off, and whatever we do or don't do is where millions and millions are going to live for hundreds of years. So if that is going to happen in the next 30 or 40 years, let's see what we've done in the last 40 years, because if it's good, okay, let's just do more of the same. Well, there are many good things. I don't want to be negative. For example, in the last 40 years, we have gone in the world extreme poverty from 4 out of 10 people were living in extreme poverty. Now it's less than 1 out of 10. The children, almost everything that children were dying of 30, 40 years ago has gone down to a half or even 20 or 10%. The life expectancy has grown everywhere. People connected to mobiles, and now with COVID, we felt what it means. We went almost from nothing to almost everybody. People connected to the internet from 1990, no one, and now almost all the countries, most of the people in the countries. And of course, there are some big issues. We got 2.5 billion, almost 1 out of 3 people do not have access to sanitation. But we got to remember that only 25, 30 years ago, it was half of the population. So it's also big improvement from half to 1/3. The people living without water, access to improved water, it went from almost 1 in 4 to less than 1 in 10. So there's a lot of accomplishments. Moving from 23% to less than 9%. But from the point of view of creating cities, we haven't done as well. This is how we've been doing cities. We've been segregating people, sending the poor people to the worst places where there are no jobs and parks and places. This is the US, some of the cities by zip code. Imagine the zip codes that are dark red, the life expectancy is 60. The ones in light pink is 90. How can we even accept that it's normal that just because you happen to be born in one zip code, you're going to live 50% more than others? And not only more, but much better quality of life. And when we overlap in any of these cities, this is Chicago, but you can do any city in the US, the same places where there is low life expectancy, also there is food deserts, there is unemployment, and also there are few parks and few tree canopy. In the last 40 years, we've been focusing on cars, and not on people's happiness. And this is how we've been creating cities. And we haven't even solved mobility by investing these billions. I mean, after thousands of years, this is Florence, Italy, and one highway intersection at the same scale. After thousands of years, we had learned how to do cities, and then we unlearned how to do cities. The cities are not the what, the population is more at the national level, but the cities do decide the how. And this is how we've been doing cities in the last 40 years. There are no trees, there are no parks. Actually, instead of parks, we've been doing parking lots. This is Houston, this is Kansas City, Missouri. Everything on red are parking lots. So imagine the children, the elderly, the people with disabilities. So the last 40 years, the overwhelming majority that we've done in cities is pretty bad or mediocre. Very few exceptions that almost like acupuncture around the world. So we need to improve the cities that we have today, but we also got to create great cities for many, many more people. We will have to create the cities radically different. And not only the creating, but we need to plan them different. We need to manage them different. It doesn't matter if the city is 2,000 people or 500,000 or 5 million, the issues are similar. The solutions are different, but the issues are the same. You need public transit in a city of 10,000 people. You need it in the city of 10 million. It's going to be a different public transit. You need parks and recreation of quality in 10,000 people or in 5 million people or in 10 million. In any city, we're going through public health crisis and COVID and many other health issues, as well as equity and population growth, and we're living longer. And living longer not just in Montgomery County. Look at this, we've been around 200,000 years, but in 200,000 years, up until 200 years ago, 200 years ago, all these dots are the countries in the world. We did not have one single country with a life expectancy above 45. Today, we don't have any with a life expectancy below 45. This is amazing. But we got big issues of climate change. And when we were thinking how to tackle climate change and what to do, even if some didn't want to believe on it, COVID arrived. And COVID arrived, and some people say all changed. I don't think that much has changed yet. I think that our perception changed. It was like if we had gotten some magnifying glasses to see the cities, and now we are seeing something that was there. The invisible became visible. And actually, with over 80% of the hotel rooms empty, we have people sleeping on the streets, on the sidewalks, on the parks. We had homeless everywhere. So what is the equity? We're really seeing huge problems of equity. On the positive side, with fewer cars on the streets, we went from this to this. So we need to decide, how do we want to live? Do we want to go back to this? Or do we want a new better? But it will not just happen by magic. How do we want to live is something that we need to keep in mind. I think the post-COVID has to focus on health. Everything we do has to be health, equity, and sustainability. Those have to be the three pillars of the post-COVID. And not just talking, but actually doing. We need to act. And when I'm talking about health, I talk about the definition of the World Health Organization. It's the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not just the absence of disease. And I'm talking about sustainability. I'm talking about sustainable happiness, which is the happiness that contributes to the individual, the community, of the global well-being, as long as it does not exploit other people, the environment, or future generations. And when we're talking about equity, is giving everybody what they need to be successful, which is very different to equality. When we're talking about equality, is giving everybody the same. No, some people are starting so far behind that we need to provide much more support. For example, Robert Wood Johnson did this graph, and equality, you cannot give everybody the same bicycle. You give the one that they need in order to be able to ride. So in other words, we need to ensure equity before we can actually enjoy equality. So let's keep in mind the opportunity and responsibility, because some people say, oh, the change is gonna be so easy. People know this one runs on money and makes you fat. This one runs on fat and saves you money. So everything is gonna change. We're gonna be putting grass on the streets and planting trees and creating these linear parks. But unfortunately, it's not gonna be that easy, because there's also many, many forces moving in the opposite direction. They wanna be more isolated. They wanna be more car dependent. They don't wanna use public transit. They don't wanna use public places. So we will have to act on the future that we want. It's not just about slogans, build back better, but actually we need to build better. How do you want Montgomery County to become? That is the theme of today, because we got a great opportunity. And let's think for a minute, let's jump over COVID-19 and let's change the way of doing things. If we want a Montgomery County that is equitable and sustainable, where all residents, all are going to live healthier and happier. And doing research for today, I went through many, many documents and internet and so on. One that was interesting was Montgomery County trends. And it was especially interesting to me because many, many years ago, I graduated from Winston Churchill, and another brother also, and my older brother graduated from Walt Whitman, where actually I see that the parking lot still is same size or even bigger than the classrooms. By the way, that's not a good symptom. But that brother ended up being mayor of Bogota twice. I ended up working in more than 350 different cities in the last 25 years. And now Montgomery County is transforming itself in so many ways, so many positive ways, such as higher densities. We need density because land use and mobility are two sides of the same coin. If we want people to walk or bike to school, we need to have schools, small schools where the catchment area is small so that people can walk or bike or take public transit. Still, Montgomery County, I see this car, like since 1990, the last 30 years, the use of car has changed very, very little. Most of the residents live in Montgomery County and work like 2/3 work in Montgomery County, 1/3 does not and has been pretty constant in the last 25 years. African American and Hispanic households have higher low income and lower high income than the others. The household income, there's a lot of differences. 1 in 5 household has an income over 200,000, but also much more than that. 2 in 5, almost 40% have a household income of less than 50,000. So like during COVID, this must have had even higher impact. This is before COVID, a huge impact. Also, the baby boomers, this is growing as all over the place. And this is fantastic. The baby boomers are really givers, are not takers. For example, it has gone in Montgomery County from 1 in 20 being over 65. Now is 1 in 5 and continues to grow. The foreign-born residents, Montgomery County, it used to be only 12 out of 100. Now it's 33 out of 100, which is much higher than both Maryland, the Washington region, or even the US, so 33%. So it went from 12 to 33. And most of these foreign-borns, Latin American are 37%, Asian are 37%. By the way, this is important also on how we deal with people. So most likely I'm going to be doing this same presentation to the Hispanic population in Spanish. The same, but in Spanish. People say, oh, but everybody that comes, they learn English. Yeah, the new generations do. When they go to school, they learn. But many of the adults and older adults, they do not. So it's interesting to engage people in other languages. So, but let's think of the post-COVID of Montgomery County. Montgomery County that is more equitable and sustainable, and citizens healthier and happier. So let's talk about people and cities. So I want to recommend 5 actions on having healthy lifestyle. So I'm going to talk, these are the topics that I will be talking about. The 5 actions: walking and cycling, parks, extreme weather parks, priority citizens, the benefits, and I'm going to end with change. And then we'll have time for questions and comments. We got to have healthier lifestyles. If we want to live healthier and happier, we need healthier lifestyle. 1, we got to eat more plant-based. And part of this is having in the parks and schools and community centers, farmer markets. All over the Montgomery County, let's have farmers markets. Let's have urban gardening in the parks, in the schools, in the libraries, so that children and adults and older adults will learn that the tomatoes don't come out of a factory, that we grow them. I mean, I'm not asking everyone on the call to be vegetarian, but if half of us on the call, for example, ate half as much meat, what is the impact? That is the same as if half of us became vegetarian. So this is part of what we need to be doing. Number 2, we need to sleep 7 or 8 hours. Everybody, young and old, everybody needs around 8 hours. Some a little bit more, a little bit less. But of course, to be able to sleep 7 or 8 hours, we need to have a roof over our head. A place to live is a human right. 3, we need to socialize. Socialize is critical, and during COVID, we have seen how isolation has had a huge impact on mental health. We can socialize on the sidewalks. It's not just about being together, because if everybody is on a telephone, then it's not gonna work. But we can socialize in the parks, doing activities. This is very critical. It's not just the hardware, it's the software. So we need to, there are many places where we can socialize in the children, and in the children playground, we need to have benches so that also parents and grandparents socialize. 4, we need to have contact with nature and practice mindfulness. And this has to be close to home, because this can be done whether we do it in Arizona, in the desert botanical garden, or where we do it in Hawaii or anywhere. Part of it, we need contact with nature and to practice mindfulness. And 5, we need to be physically active. And physically active, there are many, many modes. We go to the parks, we play basketball, or it can be on the sidewalks, or it can be running. It can be so many ways. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about physical activity later. But these are the 5 actions. And all of them are doable by anybody. What is amazing is that we know what needs to be done, but somehow we still not do it. I mean, the people that have died of COVID, by far the biggest segment are the very, very old. The people that have a lot of health issues and are usually in the last 3 to 5 years of their lives. But after that, it's people with bad health, mostly people with high obesity and others. So we need to work on this. I would say the top priority post-COVID is to have healthier lifestyles. And a lot of this is individual, but then a lot of it is also having communities that are going to help us, that are going to makes it a lot easier to be healthier than to be unhealthy. So that's part of it. I mean, let me talk about the last one, physical activity. If we are active, we're going to decrease premature deaths and strokes and many cancer and osteoporosis, as well as high blood pressure. And it's not about doing marathons. Children, they just got to do 60 minutes a day, and adults 30 minutes, but it has to be 5 or more days a week. And there are many, many studies that show the impact of 30 minutes a day. There's an urgency for us to be physically active. People are waiting for the magic pill. Sorry, there is no magic pill. The only way that Montgomery County is going to be physically active, the only way is if people walk or bike as a normal part of everyday life, in the parks, in the trails, in the sidewalks. That's why I'm putting so much emphasis in this presentation on this activity. I mean, we can play golf once or twice a week. We can play soccer once or twice a week. But if we want to be 5 or more days a week, it's walking or cycling as a normal part of everyday life. That's why we got to put a lot of emphasis on those trails interwoven into each community of Montgomery County. And sustainable mobility and parks are good for physical health, but there is no health without mental health. Loneliness. And under COVID, this has been a big issue in all ages. Some people say, oh, it's the older people. No, teenagers, young people, all ages are having an impact in loneliness. It increases the probability of heart disease, of strokes, twice the probability of dementia. The new Surgeon General, which also was under Obama, Dr. Murphy, says that loneliness has the impact of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Depression is the world-leading cause of disabilities. If we have contact with nature, it's going to improve our mood, our cognitive attention. That's why it's critical. When I've been working in Puerto Rico, I enjoy riding the bike. I donated 10 days of work there after the hurricane. Or working in Alaska, same thing. We gotta be close to nature. It doesn't matter the temperature or the place or the time of the season, being close to nature. Going to the parks is 365 days. If we have green neighborhoods, it's going to lower the depression, the anxiety, the stress. So it's critical. It's not just nice to see trees on the sidewalks and to go to the park and find trees and green spaces and plants and flowers and allotment gardens. No, this is good for mental and physical health. It's going to lower depression, our anxiety, our stress. And it's completely doable. So these are the ways that we can help. If around the children's playgrounds, we have trees and we have green. We need to have nature everywhere, at home, in the sidewalks, in the schools, in the places of work, and of course, in the parks. In the parks, we need to have nature everywhere. And let me take you back a little bit. Before, I live in Toronto, Canada, but before immigrating, I was in Bogota, Colombia, and I learned that it wasn't about the money. It was about vision and action. I was commissioner, and one of the things that we did, we built in one term over 200 parks all over the city, small one, medium, large. It was one of them. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then the Pope left, and nothing happened. No, there were not even sidewalks. Nothing happened in 27 years. Why nothing happened? Because change is hard. In Bethesda, in Gettysburg, in Potomac, in Silver, or in Bogota, in Copenhagen, in Tokyo, everywhere you try to change and the cave people show up. Who are the cave people? They are the citizens against virtually everything. But don't take no for an answer, and even less now during COVID and post-COVID. We gotta find that little crack through the window and run through it. We need to find the solutions to the problem, not problems to the solution. And this is why it was like this for 27 years, and in only 4 years, we turned it into the best park for active, for passive, for contemplative, for things that people can do at any age and with any level of ability. And some is passive, some is contemplative, some is active recreation. It's really a mix of all of these things that you can do on your own, or you can bring your friends, or things that you can do with thousands of people. That's part of the parks. So this is the Simon Bowler, but it's not about having one iconic. Any city can have one iconic great park. It's about having hundreds, thousands of great parks. We did build hundreds, especially in the poorest areas of the city, where they need even more great parks. So low-income people, and that is something also about COVID that is showing us the issues of equity. Low-income people need better parks and better public places, because when you live in a very small place, there you sleep, you don't live, you live is outside. So outside, you need to have better sidewalks and bikeways and parks and trees and tree canopy. Another thing we did, of course, we didn't do the Central Park, but this was my inspiration. I was reading the biography of Frederick Olmsted, who did a Central Park 150 years ago. Was my inspiration for Ciclovia. I found a small program with a few kilometers, a few thousand people. And I remember that he would say, there's so much conflict between the rich and the poor, the immigrants and locals, white and black. And then that was the motivation on this master plan. And then he wanted everybody to meet each other as equals. And the more that I thought about it, I said, you know, any city could have its own Central Park from the point of view of social integration and physical activity. And it's the streets, We have them right there. We created the world's largest pop-up park. Sunday mornings, we open it up and people come out. Open streets to people, close them to cars, and the magic happens. In any city of any size, anywhere it can happen. These are the colors by income size. I wanted the poorest neighborhoods and the wealthiest neighborhoods to mix as equal. 75 miles every Sunday. 75 miles that connect also the main parts of the city. And then you see young and old and rich and poor and fat and skinny, people doing all kinds of activities every Sunday and holiday. So it's about 64 days of the year. We get 1 out of 4 people coming out every Sunday. And why is this important? Because it's changing minds. All of a sudden, it reminds people that the streets are public space. They belong to everybody. And they can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. And it works in cities of 50,000 people or cities of 20 million people. It works because it's about social integration. And now that Montgomery County has such a diverse population, it's great to have people meeting each other as equals. And it's as successful in India as it is in Paris. So we meet each other as equals. All of a sudden, the owners of the large corporations and their families are meeting their minimum wage workers and their families as equals. And that's important. That's why hundreds have it. And now under COVID, when we needed to be active, physically active, but also physically distanced, some cities decided to open up streets. The streets are public space. This is Paris. This is Auckland, New Zealand. This is Oakland, California. Magnificent. Oakland, in one day, in 24 hours, the mayor said, tomorrow, these 72 miles are going to be slow streets. What is a slow street? A street that only the cars that live in that block can go, no one else. People that are going from point A to point B use the arterials. Only the people that live in the block can go in. So this is extending. It's like a park, like a paved park in so many ways. And this is going in there, you can go only at 5 miles an hour. Under COVID, the physical distance in many ways, this open streets program that had begun in many places in the US, and like Mike was just telling about in Montgomery County, it was the idea, it was the inspiration that served as a detonator that with COVID, open streets started popping up all over the US, in small cities, in large cities, because in many ways, a horrible situation, and COVID is a horrible situation, can become an opportunity. We've seen around the world with fewer cars, all of a sudden people started doing corridors of protected bikeways all over the world. Things that would have taken 5-10 years were taking only months, and sometimes not even months. Sometimes it was just weeks, such as these streets for people walking. So it's really amazing. All of a sudden doing bus-only lanes or having farmer markets on the streets. This was really transformational. Imagine in San Francisco turning golf courses into public parks in 24 hours. So instead of having 200 people playing golf, which is the maximum 200, 250 per day, now you could have thousands and thousands of people enjoying the public golf courses. Somehow the impossible became possible. And then, I mean, let's think for a minute about these golf courses. Because the reality is that there is no moral or ethical justification of golf courses if your city has a deficit of parks or housing. Imagine you have a lot of money in the bank and you can either buy land, public land, to do golf courses, or you can buy the same public land, half for parks and half for housing. These are the things that we're starting to think with COVID, when equity became a big issue, as well as sustainability. I mean, which one would you choose? I mean, forget about the golf course, because sometimes people are concerned about golf players. What if the same land you were going to use for 10 cricket pitches, or you were going to do it for half a park or half housing? So let's open up our mind. Let's have imagination. Let's put everything on the table as we move forward. Let's talk about sustainable mobility. Why talk about sustainable mobility? Because every single trip to a park begins and ends walking. Everything. We walk from the car, we walk from public transit, we walk from bicycles, we walk everywhere. I mean, walking and cycling is not a joke. This could be any street in Montgomery County. And actually some are starting to look like that in Bethesda and other places. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. This little girl knows that it's not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. It's the only individual for all children and youth. You might be the son or the daughter of the wealthiest person in Montgomery County. If you're under 16, your only individual mode of mobility is to walk or to bike. So doing it safe and enjoyable should be almost like a human right, unless you think that only the people that have the money and the age and the desire to have a car have the right to individual mobility. That's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is really linked to everything. So let's think, how do we want to live? I mean, walking. That's how we were created. You know, just like the birds fly or the fish swim, people, we walk in the middle of the winter and we use all our senses. Maybe that's why we're so happy. We're walking and we see the children playing, or we see the youth going to school. We hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee shop and we smell the aroma. Parents and children walk, older adults walk. We walk in the summer, we walk in the winter. Everybody walks, but it needs to be safe. And it's not safe. It's not safe. You know, these are not about accidents. It's about incidents that we are having all over the place. You know, it's thousands and thousands. Last year, even with fewer cars, more people died in the US, more pedestrians were killed by people driving cars. So we need vision zero. We need to say no one should be dying on the streets. But it's not just about saying, because if you don't put the money or the actions, then it's not vision zero, it's zero vision. We know what needs to be done. We need to have the trees and the sidewalks and the protected byway and the public transit. I mean, if we're going to put public walking, we need to lower the speed. Imagine that all of the streets in Montgomery County were 20 miles an hour, 20, all of them, except the arterials. The arterials might be 30 or 40. It's not because 20 is plenty, it sounds nice. It's because if you get hit by a person driving a car at 20 miles an hour, there is 5% probability of being killed. At 40, it's over 80%. So when you set the limit of speed, you say, okay, at 20, so I'm going to allow 5% of the people to be killed. At 22, at 25, and 30, at 35, this is a political decision. How many people are going to be killed by people driving? Because we know what is the impact of the speed. This is really an issue of life or death. That's why many cities, like Bilbao last month, declared citywide 30 kilometers an hour, which is the same as 20 miles an hour. These are not a technical issue. We know that if we have a small island on the crosswalk, we eliminate half of the incidents. So why are we still doing those crosswalks without an island? We know the kids are on a field trip, they don't cross in one traffic light, they wait for the next traffic light, and then they continue. So this is how we save lives, and this is how we're going to promote walking of people of all ages. It is not people first when we do these kind of sidewalks, or when we even, we do these bridges that we say, oh, for pedestrians. That's not a bridge for pedestrians. That's a bridge for the cars so that they can go faster. For pedestrians, rather cross on a nice crosswalk at level. I mean, why are you going to force a pedestrian to go up like 50 steps and then cross 20 and then come down another 50 steps when it would have been so easy to do. You know, we know how to make it safe, and this is not safe. Also, when we don't even do sidewalks, we're telling these people you are a second-class citizen. You know, the sidewalks, all of the same with COVID, we needed to go out with 6 feet of distance. Most of the sidewalks were not even wide enough for 2 people to walk at the same time. Instead, we had all of this space for storage of cars, not even for moving cars, for storage. So then we realized COVID taught us that we need to give much more priority to people walking, because everybody walks. 100% of the people walk. The sidewalks also are so important. When you're on the street, on bicycles, on public transit, or on cars, you're going from point A to point B. Not on sidewalks. On sidewalks is where people meet boyfriends and girlfriends. You go to any city, you leave your bags, you go walking on the sidewalk. That's where you develop a sense of belonging. You meet your neighbors, the people selling fruits and flowers. The sidewalks is the life of the city. People use them in the summertime. People use them in the winter. Children catch Pokemons. People catch public transit on the sidewalks. On cities of any size, the sidewalks are very, very, very important. So we should give an absolute priority to the sidewalks. The sidewalks remind us that walking is much more than walking. When I work in Buenos Aires, I see people dancing tango on the sidewalks. In so many ways, the sidewalks are part of the family of the parks. But of course, sustainable mobility is not just walking. It's also about riding bicycles, using public transit, new uses of cars. I mean, walking, it's a main part of it because everybody does it. The others, not everybody. So we saw how some cities were transforming, whether it's Paris or Berlin or Mexico or Bogota, many were transforming. Well, this is any community in Montgomery County can do it. This is how children should be going to the parks and to the schools. And it's totally doable. Any community. I'm really glad that Casey said Montgomery County has the best park system in the world. Or he said in the US. Well, the goal, there is no reason why Montgomery County could not be as good as anybody in anything. Any of the urban areas in Montgomery County could be as good for cycling as Copenhagen. Why not? Copenhagen is colder in the winter, it's hotter in the summer, it rains all year round. Why do they bike in Copenhagen? It's not because they are poor. They have a higher per capita income than Montgomery County, a higher level of education. But it's because it's safe, it's inexpensive, and it's connected. And you can do exactly the same infrastructure. Make it safe, make it inexpensive, and make it connected. And people are gonna ride bicycles in Montgomery County. And this is beautiful, and it's completely doable. You know, they say there's no such thing as bad weather. It starts to rain, they put on their clothing, and they go on. And they have cars, but they use their cars on the weekends or at night, or many of them also don't have cars. 41, while in Montgomery County is less than 2%, here is more than 41 out of 100 trips are done on bicycles. And they're not happy, they want to go to 50%. Men don't need shirts in the summertime, women don't need special shoes, and they bike, but it's physically separated. The way they do it is at one level is for cars, 3 inches higher is for bicycles, and 3 inches higher is for people walking. And they continue to improve, and they build traffic lights at the speed of the cyclists, and they're building new bridges, and they're doing all kinds of, this is the mode of mobility in Montgomery County. I mean, in Copenhagen. I wish it was Montgomery County, but this should be your goal. Why not? They went from a similar crisis that now, in the 1970s, they went from a crisis to change. It's not because the Danish are so different. The oil crisis in the 1970s, that also happened in America. Many people couldn't use their cars, so people started walking and riding bicycles. And since there was no safe infrastructure in Copenhagen or in Amsterdam, a lot of children were being killed, and they did huge demonstrations when someone was killed. And that's when they started to build the network of protected bikeways. And look what happens when you develop a network of protected bikeways. People start to ride their bicycles. So it's your decision. How do you want Montgomery County to become? That's the idea. If we're going to improve bikeability, simple rule of thumb. If it's not safe for an 8 and an 8-year-old, it's nothing. There's nothing. Don't even call it a bikeway. Anything that you do, please think of the children. Think of people. It's not just the adults on spandex that can go in between trucks. Think about the children that will not go in between trucks, of the immigrants that come from places where cycling is not very normal, of the older people on their tricycles. I mean, these are nice to have, but they don't get more people cycling. Parking and maps and racks on the buses and class. No, that is nice for the 2% that are already cycling. If you want new people, the only way is, one, to lower the speeds to 20 miles an hour, and two, to develop a network of protected bikeways. So everything I said about 20 miles for walking is the same for cycling. So I'm just gonna say, develop a network of AAA bikeways. It's for all ages and abilities. It's not for the 20 to 15 spandex. It's for everyone, including the spandex. We need connectivity. Some cities do one and say, oh, let's see if people use it. No, if now 30% of your ride is safe, but the other 70% is not, people are not gonna use it. Think of daytime and nighttime and people opening the doors. And if you don't want to have the money or the political decision to do it permanent, okay, don't just paint a line. Enhance the painted line with bollards every 6 feet. And then it's going to make a world of difference. That's why people bike in Copenhagen, because there is connectivity of AAA, all ages and abilities. And if we're going to put public transit, a civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. Said my brother who was mayor. It's the one where the rich people use public transit. So Montgomery County, you need to have quality public transit for everybody. It's not just for the low income. Part of it is marketing, the name, the colors, the positioning. You know, in Malmo, the mayor didn't want to use buses because citizens didn't like them. So he put a nose, he covered the wheels, and now they look like trains. Imagine that these were the buses in Montgomery County. Part of it, we need speed, we need frequency, we need connectivity. Remember the bus-only lanes that people are doing during COVID? In a week, they are doing it. Do it. And people say, oh, but we don't have the space for public transit. Think, you want one of these or 140 of those? You do have the space. But it's just a political decision. Rapid is not if it has rubber or metal wheels, it's if it has dedicated lanes. So all of this can be done. Remember, walking, cycling, and transit takes up a lot less space than cars. And the elements that you gotta keep in mind: capacity, capital costs, operating costs, environmental impact. Walking and cycling by far has less impact than any other mode, and then public transit. So we need to think, these are the capacity of one corridor by modes. You see, a regular bus moves 9,000 people, but if you have dedicated lanes, you can go up to 43,000 people hour. Capital cost and passing. But now we're going to talk about parks. We're not. This is because how are you going to get to the parks? That's why sustainable mobility is so critical. But great parks in Montgomery County, they're great if people visit, they stay, and they come back. It's not about winning awards. It's not about architectural awards. The biggest problem I see in parks all over is management, because many cities confuse and they think management is the same as maintenance, picking up the garbage, cutting the grass. No, that might be 20%. Of course, management includes maintenance, but it's not just that. It's about having grandparents and grandchildren doing bread. It's about having people walking and cycling and playing chess and having lunch and picnic and taking a nap. It's about the uses and the activities. It's about having volunteers, but have the tools for the volunteers. It's about asking the community before, during, after. What is it that the community wants? It's about having the resources, human, financial. It's about having equitable access. It's not just the wealthy neighborhoods with great parks and the poor neighborhoods with poor parks. No, it's about having that complement so that not all parks are the same. Of course, also safety. People talk about safety. Well, it's not about putting up signs, beware of the thieves. That's like inviting the thieves. You need police when the parks are empty. You don't need them when they have a lot of people. Sometimes I go to cities and it seems easier to find millions to do parks and the thousands to make them work. The lower cost of security in parks is uses and activities. We need to have the movie night and we need to have the walking groups. Empty parks have fewer benefits. So we need to have the programs and the activities. Sometimes management seems invisible, but someone gave the permit for the flower market or to organize the laughing yoga. Should we have small or large parks in Montgomery County? Well, we need to have both because they satisfy very different. We need a small neighborhood park close to home during COVID, when people said you can only go near your house, half a mile, 1 mile around your house. Well, that was the neighborhood park where you could go. But then if you want to do some other activities, you need the medium-sized parks. If you want to play soccer or do other activities, so you need the small, you need the medium, but also you need the large ones for other activity. When you want to go canoeing or so or whatever. So we need citywide park systems. And when people talk about small or large, it's the same when they tell me, Gil, should we do trails in parks? Are they recreation or transportation? Who should do it? Well, it's both, it's both. Sometimes we're gonna use the same trail for recreation one day, for transportation, even on the same day. We might use it once for transportation, another time for recreation. It's for both. The trails are magnificent because they are kind of like our paths into nature. It takes us into another place. It also connects different areas. The trails are not a drive-to facility. The trails must be interwoven into the city, so that look at the trails in Minneapolis, which has the best park system in the cities. In dense area, separate people walking and cycling, because people walk at 3 miles an hour. People bike at 15 miles an hour. So when you mix them, you create conflict. So where there's low density, you can have mixed trails. As soon as it starts getting into denser areas, separate. And even places like San Antonio that has all of these cars, they had to create the trails in the heart of the city. So this is so critical to have the walk and bike trails interwoven, because we need to be able from our house to be able to walk or run or bike to the trail. And we need to have flexibility, whether it's the summer or the winter time. This is across from my house here in Toronto, because we really need that nature everywhere, the nature for all, regarding of the economic or social status, and we need to have it everywhere. And every city must have, every person must have access to a park or a play area within a short, 100 million people in the US, 1 out of 3 who lives in cities doesn't have a park within a short walk. So I invite people to think of 10, 20, 30. Is everybody should have a park within 10 minutes by 2030. So let's start building parks in the few areas in Montgomery County when they are not. And let's think of everything that is public, the street, the school, the libraries. If it's a school, let's turn that playground into a real playground. Why so much green? Because playing in green reduces the attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. And this is what people call playground in the schools, most places. We need to do. And also when we do this, we need to open it up to the community. We need to work everything that is public, has to be like one. If not, then the streets, creating street areas. One thing during COVID that has taken off is the concept from France of the 15-minute city. Well, Montgomery County should have the best communities of 15-minute city. This is basically that everybody should have within a 15-minute walk all the basic services, the parks, the retail stores, the public transit, the schools, and so on. So this is critical. So everything also has to have different, it has to multiply. Part of the 15-minute city is like the school is not just for students. The students from 8 to 4. But in the evenings can be for the community, or Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. Everything that is public has to work in sync, including the libraries. Sometimes they're so isolated, almost like if there were different entities. It's the same taxpayer. That's part of sustainability. How can we have such magnificent schools closed during the summer or at night or Saturdays or Sundays, or the libraries? Everything, parks and recreation must be totally interwoven with all the other departments in the city. Roads for cars turning into parks for people. This is about the transformations. The Chengdu River in Seoul, South Korea was covered by cars 50 or 60 years ago. What happened? Full of cars. So they built a second floor. What happened? It got full of cars, like everywhere. There is no city in the world that has some mobility through the private car. None. What happened? This is 8 miles through the heart of the city. They wanted a third floor. The mayor said, no, we're going to put a public transit. He tore down the second, the first, he brought out the river, and then he created a magnificent linear park of 8 miles. And people said, Mayor, are you crazy? People are not going to stop for coffee. As if 60 miles an hour people were going to stop for coffee. Now they stop for coffee because there is very slow traffic on both sides and public transit and 8 miles of linear park. That's why we need vision and action and passion and perseverance in order to be able, and guts, of course. This is Oros. There was the same, a river through the middle. They put cars. They said, can we go to Montgomery County and bring the best people? Probably not. So someone said, oh, let's bring out the river. So you want to live in this Oros or in this one? This is about quality of life. And this is Portland. This is Madrid, Spain. And this is the transformation. This is New York. And this is magnificent Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain. And now with COVID, look what cities are doing. Now that we realize nature is good for mental and physical health, Paris said, even the Champs-Élysées, that is full of cars, like 12 lanes of cars, the mayor said, half of it is going to be a park within 3 years. And they are starting to green places all over. I mean, following the lockdown, we saw that a lot of indoor places of fitness were closed, yogas and gymnasiums and all that. And then people went to the parks. And then we even had to do all over the world this circle so that people would be physically separated. But parks. Now, finally, parks are getting a status. Before COVID, many decision makers thought that parks was just fun and games. With fun and games is very, very important, but it's even more than that. It's about mental and physical health. And of course, about happiness. So remember that this reaction, the post-COVID, everything we do about post-COVID, the umbrella is health, equity, sustainability. So let's keep that in mind. And then some people say, also during COVID, we saw the winter came. And what happened? People went to the parks. Parks are 52 weeks of the year infrastructure. Parks are not just a summer activity. Parks is an infrastructure for all over the year. So we need to focus on those uses and activities. And we need to remember the Scandinavian, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. Parks have to be in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, always have different activities and different uses. And in the extreme weather, where it's too hot or too cold, in the winter time, I know that in Montgomery County, you got 15 horrible days per year. And this little girl knows it too. And you have another 45 that are cold, are not that great. But you got over 250 very good days. But the problem is that when we focus on the 15 horrible days, we end up with 365 bad days. Some cities do horrible things like a gigantic vacuum. Toronto, we do an underground in the city, and which is, it's like a vacuum, sucks the life out of the city. Others do it above ground in other cities where the only life are the signs that they put on the walls. They don't integrate, they totally segregate. They don't want low income or youth with skateboards or older people. I mean, if we have extreme weather, we need to have infrastructure for extreme weather. I mean, why not? Let's focus on the 200 good ones. And then even in the not so good ones, we need to have a different attitude. We need even to start by telling the media, the people in the weather, stop. When it starts to get cold in Montgomery County, then the media say, oh, if you can go to Florida or go to Arizona. No, the weather people that don't like winter, they should go to Florida because it's not going to disappear. So let's enjoy it. Let's see how to do activities. Let's program the uses. Let's do movie in the park. But then in the winter, we need to have better sound and better image and hot chocolate and all kinds of activities. And you don't have this cold weather like in Winnipeg where the river freezes, or in Minneapolis, in Minnesota where people go ice fishing. And something about winter, people, something more than the weather, the cold is that they don't like the fact that it's dark. So put a lot of lights, and these lights, don't call them Christmas lights, call them winter lights, and have all those lights, not for 2 weeks of the year, have them from November to March. I mean, let's evaluate cities by how do we treat the most vulnerable cities. So let's move from the weather to the vulnerable citizens. By age is the children and the elderly, but also the people that are poor, or the people that have disabilities, so people that are racial minorities or ethnic minorities, or women in many places. This is Montgomery County parks and planning, and any area should focus on the vulnerable people. And let's say, as an example, children and older adults. Montgomery County, every community should be around playability. You go to the sidewalk and there's a swing. You wait for public transit and there's a small parkade. It's not about the money. Any community in Montgomery County can do this. This isn't expensive and it improves the quality of life of everyone. You don't need to ask this girl if she's happy. Look at her face. She's overjoyed. I mean, it's fun and games, but it's not all about fun and games. It's how children learn, by playing. So we need to play everywhere. It improves our muscle strength, sociability, the language, the coordination. I mean, and within children, I want you to put a special emphasis because during COVID, we saw that the small children, the 0 to 4, were so affected that there was huge effort to keep the daycares open and the caretakers. Think for a minute. If you could experience your community from 95 centimeters, which is the height of a 3-year-old, what would you change? What would you change? We gotta focus, not children, because many planners think that the children are born 5 years old and they do things from 5 to 12, but they forget from 0 to 4. So let's put a special emphasis on the 0 to 4 in every park, in every community, in every crosswalk. These are gonna be our future city builders. And also let's think of the multi-generations. And the beauty of intergenerational. I took this photo this weekend. This is my only grandchild. Imagine the happiness of both, but especially even more of the grandfather. I mean, the time with grandchildren really is priceless. And we need to work on this because we are having more and more grandchilds and great grandfathers and grandmothers as well. So having parks that works for both, like every single playground for children should have a nice cozy area for grandparents so that they can go and have a coffee and socialize and combat loneliness. So this is critical. I mean, we're living longer, not longer, much, much, much longer. And our body is aging, but not our spirit, not our mind. The people that have ever lived to 60 in the history of humanity are alive today. And people are gardening, and people are having ice cream, and people are playing with their grandchildren. And also people have money. In the US, the population over 60, if it was a separate country, it would be the 3rd largest economy in the world after the US and China. And the population over 60 is gonna double, and the population of 80 is gonna quadruple. So we gotta think, this is like our 3rd act. The first act is from 0 to around 20, the second act from 20 to around 60, and the 3rd act is from 60 on. It's a full 1/3 of our lives. And there is so much ageism that we need to combat, because this can be, if we're healthier and happier in that part of life, also we're gonna be healthier and happier in the last 5 years of our lives. So we gotta work on this. Older people are givers, they're not takers. They're assets to the community, not liabilities. In the US, the life expectancy in the last 200 years, double. We learn how to survive. But with these issues of climate change and public health crisis and congestion and so on, we need to learn how to live. And parks and recreation has a huge role to play in how we learn how to live more equitable and more sustainable, because a lot of it is about the built environment and the uses and the activities for people of all ages. So the older adults is something that is critical, and we need to have that contact with nature that parks and recreation is going to provide. So and it doesn't have to be big. When I went to Charlotte, I saw this, it's almost the size of a basketball court, half of it children's games, half of it adults games, and there's a walking path around it. Fantastic. Of course, walking is the #1 activity, but also older adults want to garden and knit and tai chi and yoga and dance and read and watch. And we know what people need to do. We need to have activities. Programs. We invest so much money in programming for children and youth, or almost nothing for the over 60. We need to start programming as much for the people over 60. Sometimes we do the walking path and we say, oh, but we see the people walking. No, we see the few that are walking. We don't see the many that are not. We need to have programs in order to get people out, in order to get people doing activities. And infrastructure is not just about benches and walking paths, even though every single park should have a walking path. It's also about restaurants and drinking fountains. And restaurants, 52 weeks of the year. It's not that we don't have this season, they are closed for the season. No. And we need to have those benches that are kind of magical, and having places where people can go in a wheelchair and people can sit and knit. Why are we talking about these parks and how to get to them? It's not because TV sucks. This is really not about parks or about recreation or about walking. This is about healthier and happier people. It's a more equitable and sustainable Montgomery County. It's about the benefits. Everything that we've been talking, parks and recreation is going to be good, the culture, the education, economic development, and you got to have the reasons for each one. Imagine someone, a counselor or a group of citizens worry about health. Okay, they bring in the idea that we spoke about healthier lifestyles and bring the 5 activities. So I want to end by saying, clearly we need to change. It's up to all of us. There's not going to be a Martian coming down saying, oh, I'm going to create a Montgomery County that is equitable and sustainable. Let's put on our glasses that COVID gave us, the magnifying glasses. Let's do everything around health, equity, sustainability. Let's remember to plan cities differently and manage them differently. Change is hard. That's why we don't change. Doing more of the same is easy. And as Casey said at the beginning, change is not unanimous. There will always be some people against it. Don't wait for it to be unanimous. The general interest must prevail over the particular. And the cost of doing nothing is not nothing. And 2021 is absolutely critical because now people have the mind open to changes. Later might be the opposite. Maybe they might close their mind to changes. So we need to change. Imagine when Greta said, oh, I'm going to sit here in front of the parliament. Well, now she's developing a whole movement around change with the Fridays for the Future. And now she says, I want you to act as if you were in a crisis, as if the house was on fire, because it is. She reminds me when Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Maybe she's in the middle. These are not technical decisions. These are not financial decisions. It's about policy, but it's not about political party. Any political party must be interested in mental health and physical health and happiness and equitability and sustainability and health. So that's why we need to, this is a big P. Everybody needs to participate. When I'm saying planning about, I'm talking about parts with climate change and land use and equity and sustainability. And when I'm talking about management, I'm talking about that passion, that perseverance, that doing, because we gotta get things done. It's not about talking, it's about doing. So be bold, benchmark with the best. I mean, in Montgomery County, you can benchmark with thousands of cities that are worse than you. And you don't have to do anything to continue being better the next 50 years. You can get a benchmark with some of the best in the world. You can be as good as anyone in the world, and those are the ones you should be benchmarking with. And do alliances. It doesn't matter that are separate departments or even separate the municipalities. Maybe the municipalities and the county and the state and the federal and the private sector and the NGOs and the faith groups and the businesses. And with all of them, develop the shared vision. And lots of action. And when you have the shared vision and lots of action, then you are going to be moving from talking to doing, and you are going to be able to create a Montgomery County that is more equitable and sustainable, where all people are going to be able to live healthier and happier. So Montgomery County, let's do it now. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, thank you, Gil, for that very wide-ranging, incredibly thought-provoking and inspiring talk. I have been monitoring the questions as they come in, and I'm going to take the liberty of consolidating a few. And one of the words you used that jumped out at me for the open parkways was magic. And I couldn't agree with you more, having observed what's happened over the last year with our 7 miles. I've spent a lot of time personally on my bike and jogging those parkways and taking a lot of photos. And the diversity of use and users, from young and old, from experienced to novice, kids on training wheels, older adults walking. It's just been marvelous. And you see so much social interaction. People obviously are getting physical fit, getting to meet their neighbors. And that, of course, we did as a result of the pandemic. It provided the perfect venue for us to act fast. But I do worry as we return to normal, that as we try to have some guts and have bold ideas, that we'll return a little bit to the ways of the past. We'll feel obligated to have a bunch of public meetings, and the cave people will come out and they'll say, you know, it'll take longer to get to where I need to drive to, or there'll be cut through traffic in my neighborhood. And I fear we regress. So the whole point of your talk was lessons learned during the pandemic. What do you advise as community leaders, as citizens, as elected officials? What is the secret? We're really going to take this to heart, and when we have that next bold idea, we don't get handcuffed by the cave people.
Well, thank you for your comments, and I think we need to focus on the benefits. I think that you could develop a shared agreement of the citizens of Montgomery County and decision makers that we need to focus on health, equitable, and sustainability. So once you focus on that, then the protected byways are the means and not the end. The park is the means, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the density, anything you're doing is the mean, is not the end. So if you said, okay, Montgomery County, we're going to become the healthiest county in the US or in the world. I mean, why is it that Boulder, Colorado is healthier than Montgomery County, or Seattle or Portland or other places? There is absolutely no reason why any of them should be any healthier. So that is the key element, to be really ambitious. So my suggestion would be to focus on the benefits where there can be agreement. And then you say, okay, if you wanted us to be be the healthiest with the best physical health and the best mental, okay, we gotta do physical activity 30 minutes or more every day. And the only way to do it is if we walk or bike as a normal part of everyday life. So we need to do it on the sidewalks, on the protected byways, or on the parks. And in the parks, we need to get to those parks. So my recommendation is to round up very strong around the benefits, because I agree with you. Some people there's going to be resistance from many others that are going to say, no, I want to be more isolated. I want to be more car dependent. I don't want public transit. I don't want public parks. I have my own front and backyard. So I don't. But if the goal is to be equitable, many people do not have the front and the backyard. Many people do not have the many other possibilities. So when I'm talking also about the general interest over the particular, general interest is that everybody should have access to whatever they need. That's part of being equitable. So I would focus on that, of having very strong foundations on health, on equity, and on sustainability.
Well, that's a great segue to the next question, which is a little bit specialized. We've been very proud. We've been able to invest significant funding in both physical improvements for accessibility and for program access. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of involving people with disabilities in all of this, the process and the serious benefits they receive from being active and engaged with the community?
Yeah, when I'm talking about healthier and happier, all people, it's everyone, including when I'm talking older people. Some people say, oh, but they have dementia. Well, the people with dementia can also live healthier and happier. I was working a few times with the mayor of Toyama in Japan, and he took me to a park, and he said, this park, most of the citizens of Toyama that work in the downtown, they used to live family members that their parents or grandparents that had dementia or Alzheimer, any type of dementia, at home, because they were almost ashamed of them, or they were scared that they would get lost. Now they bring him to this central park of the city, and they drop him off at 8:30 in the morning. And then they come at lunchtime, either to pick him up or just to have lunch with them. And they can do any activity they want. They can go fishing, or they can paint, or they can go on walks, or they can just stay by themselves. They can do whatever they want. And they don't worry about getting lost, because each one gets a bracelet with a GPS. So when the family member comes, so this is also people that had dementia, and even with dementia, then they realize that the important part is for that member of the family with dementia to live healthier and happier within the possibilities. It's not about if they can recognize who they are. Maybe they don't know that that's the son or the daughter. That's not what's making that person happy. But being able to go to the park is something that is really critical. That is also why we need to have even better sidewalks and crosswalk, because if someone is going on a wheelchair, sometimes when I do workshops, I try to get people, able people, decision makers, to be on a wheelchair. It would be nice, for example, if in Montgomery County, one day a year, all the decision makers were on a wheelchair for 24 hours to get an idea of how does it feel to be on a wheelchair. Even on meetings, sometimes on meetings, just be blindfolded, even sitting down on a meeting, just trying to take notes and have a coffee or whatever. So it is very important to place. Everybody is disabled in one way or another. Some people have longer legs. Some people can see better. So it is critical that is a priority. Again, that's the general interest. When I'm talking about the general interest, I'm not talking about the majority, because maybe not the majority of the population is on a wheelchair. But the general interest is that a person on a wheelchair should be able to go from anywhere to anywhere within the county. So that is the general interest over the particular interest.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of open streets. Can you share with us some other lower cost techniques that you've seen to quickly activate parks and public spaces?
Well, there are many. I'm sorry about the noise, but my office is right next to the train and a very long train is going by. Well, I think that programs and activities are very inexpensive, but we need to organize them. Because, for example, walking. When you just do the walking paths, we did a survey in the US. We analyzed with City Parks Alliance and the RAND Corporation, 750 parks across the US. The number one facility by cost benefit is walking path. It's very inexpensive. Nevertheless, only 20% of the parks had it. So, and it's not just about doing the walking path, it's also doing the walking groups, because some people that are not very athletic or whatever, or very motivated, they look out the window and say, oh, it's too sunny, or it's too cloudy, or it's too cold, or it's too hot. But if they know that there's a group waiting for them at 10 a.m., then they go, or at 6 p.m. or whenever. So there is a lot of motivation. People tend to go thinking that is because they want to be part of the walking group. The real reason is to socialize. Sometimes it's knitting. People go and you say, oh, but they could be knitting at home instead of having a knitting group in the park. Well, it's about socialize. The issue of socialize, the isolation is an issue. I was the other day in one of the top 20 cities in the US, and I was speaking with the city manager and the commissioners. It was the top 9 people in the city. And I was talking with them, and I shared an experience when I was volunteering in Puerto Rico. I was in a session with 300 people from 12 to 16-year-old. And after I spoke, one of them asked a question, said, why are you talking so much about parks when it is so difficult to find someone to go to the park with? And his voice, everybody was silent. They knew he was dead serious. And I thank this 14-year-old for having had the courage to ask that question, because many kids at 14, they feel so lonely, they end up doing drugs or having alcohol or even committing suicide. And after I spoke, one of these people in this city, one of the commissioners, the commissioner of finance, started saying, well, in this city, it's very hard to make friends. And people, the others started laughing. And then he said, no, I've been living here for 11 years. And I have not had anybody to go to the park with on a Saturday or a Sunday. I have not been to any of your homes, and none of you have been to my home. And he starts talking about his daily life, and the other 8 start crying. They could not believe that someone as close to them could be as lonely as he was. So the issue of loneliness is not only the older adults, it's also very successful adults. It's also youth. So that's why programs are so important, whether it's walking groups or it's knitting groups or it's sports, soccer or basketball or whatever. It's engaging people. Also, the older people can be, for example, magnificent volunteers, but the city needs to help them organize. For example, working in Arizona, in Phoenix, they have a botanical garden in the desert, and they have 550 older adult volunteers. And one of the things older adult needs to be happy is to have a purpose and also to leave a legacy. People want to leave a legacy. So this gave them both a legacy and a purpose. And they could volunteer from 2 to 5 days a week. And they get a jacket and they get trained and they get taught. And the botanical garden could never pay out of the fees 550 people. So they needed volunteers. And these people also, the 2 or 3 or 4 days that they go and volunteer is the highlight of the week. So it becomes a win-win. So also in many of the activities, even older adults can develop activities for other older adults or for people of any age. But let's remember that the programs are as important as the infrastructure. And it's not about events. It's not about the 4th of July. It's not about activities that take place one day a year. No, it's the ones that are daily or weekly or monthly, so that people really get into it and so that it will really have the benefit to the health.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more about the value of a robust volunteer program. It has so many different benefits, and we're very proud of the one we have. Switching gears, you talked about the importance of healthy eating and touched on the issue of food deserts. We have a pretty robust community garden program, but we have a waiting list of over 220 people. We're doing our best to increase capacity, but what impactful and progressive ways have you seen cities deal with food deserts and people needing to eat more healthy? What have you seen that's worked well?
Well, part of it is education, but I think, for example, it seems when you say we have over 200 people on the waiting list, to me that is a symptom that you need to place more effort on creating more places. Because let's say on a tennis court, you have 2 people playing. On the same area, maybe you can have 20 areas for allotment gardens. So how can we find more areas? Also because the people that have allotment gardens are magnificent eyes and ears on the park, because they go 2 or 3 times a week to the park. Also because it's great also to socialize. Like you have a lot of immigrants. 1 out of 3 people in Montgomery County were born in another country. And one of the things that I found in some cities is that the immigrants develop that sense of belonging when they have that garden, that allotment garden, because they go and they also talk to people. Others are planting and they see, oh, he has or she has these tomatoes. So they go and ask, oh, where did you get the seeds? How did you get them? And then they give him a plant and they share. Or someone is going away for a week. So they, oh, can you water my plants while I'm away? So they end up becoming friends, and then they end up talking to each other. So like there are some park users that are amazing because they are also good stewards of the park, like dog parks. The leash-free areas are really, really good also because people, they start chatting. It's about socializing, and it's interesting. Eventually, they even go out with others, and they have their own etiquette. First 1 or 2 weeks, don't ask their names. You only ask the name of the dog. After the second week, then you ask the name of the person. Then after 5 weeks, you end up going out. But anyway, those people with dogs go to the dog park every single day. In the summer, in the winter, in the rain, in the sun, so having good dog parks is great for having people, but it's always in the parks, it's really good to have a balance. Not only have sports and not only have dog parks, and not only have allotment gardens, because they end up taking over the park. Instead, if you have different stakeholders on the park, and even if they develop groups of friends of parks, and they have the schools in the area, and they have the older adults and the different ethnicities in the area, then it becomes a much more balanced friends of parks, and then it becomes very useful. So I would suggest also when people learn about food through urban gardening, or also through having farmers markets, the more that contact that people have with the land and with the plants and with the food, the more likely that they are gonna eat better and healthier. And also we need to work both ways. The grandparents can teach some things to the children, but the children also. So if it also in the school, they would place a lot more emphasis. And like this urban garden is not only in the parks, we need to have them in the schools and in the libraries and even places where people work. Also because this is magnificent. Every day a new leaf comes out or a new flower, so it's a little bit a combination of all of them. And also to realize that this is an issue of equity. When people are dying, like people were saying, oh, in New York, overwhelmingly representative of Black people and Hispanics are dying. No, it was not the Blacks and the Hispanics that were dying. It was the poor Blacks and the poor Hispanics. It was an issue of equity, of low income. The wealthy Blacks and the wealthy Hispanics were not dying. They were working from home. It was the poor people, Blacks or Hispanics, which were overwhelmingly, many more were poor than white, but also the white people that were poor were also dying. So these issues of equity, we also gotta place a lot of emphasis. And from the point of view also urban gardening, for some, it might be for mental health and for enjoyment, part of happiness. But for others, it might be also because they're gonna be able to get food that is gonna improve their quality of eating.
Well, thank you so much for that. I agree. I don't think you can overstate the importance of amenities like dog parks or community gardens, because they bring people together of a common interest to end up meeting each other, in particular for people who might be uncomfortable meeting their neighbor. The dog park example, it's just so easy to begin that conversation. I think a lot of people think the dog parks are just for the dogs, but they're as much for the people as they are for the dogs. So I think that wraps up our questions. I can't thank you enough, Gil. That was such a thought-provoking presentation, and I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation over a long time about some next steps, but I can't thank you enough. And for our audience, I have a great surprise to share with you. Gil is going to be joining us again sometime in May about another topic that he's passionate about, and we are too. The title of his topic is going to be Our Third Act, and it's about as life expectancy continues to increase around the world, we can all hope to spend a full 1/3 of our lives post 60 years old. How do we ensure the stage of life is prioritized, and what role do parks play in that? So more details to follow. Stay tuned, and we will be announcing a time and date for that presentation, and hope you can join us and help us spread the word. And we do have one edition of the Park Speaker Series that's set on April 20th. We're going to be welcoming Patsy Eubanks Owens, a professor at UC Davis and contributing editor of the Routledge Handbook of Designing Public Spaces for Young People, who will be share information on how parks can best serve another important stage of life, teenagers and adults. So our next two sessions are going to be about our younger people and our older people, and I guess we'll need to add a future session about our middle-aged people too, so we're sure not to leave anybody out. So again, stay tuned for more details. I can't thank our audience enough for spending time with us. And Gil, your presentation was awesome. Thank you one more time. And everybody have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.